The Japanese Grand Prix turned out to be an absolute roller coaster of a race, thanks to the ever-changing wet conditions. But it also produced the horrendous crane incident that's probably tainted the sport's reputation. In fact, Sergio Perez went as far as to say that it was the lowest thing he'd seen in years. In this video, we're going to talk about what went wrong at Suzuka and the drivers' reactions. So keep watching. First off, the Suzuka crane incident angers F1 drivers. Although many people said that the track conditions at Suzuka weren't ideal for F1 racing, we still got the go-ahead from the FIA after testing out the waters with wet tires. It didn't take long for things to go south though, as Carlos Sainz lost control of his Ferrari and crashed straight into the advertisement barriers, and this prompted an immediate safety car to lead the drivers through a lap while the marshals took care of the Spaniard's wreckage. Now with so much downpour and all the spray from the cars in front, it can be super hard to see what's in front. So the race directors did the logical thing and red flagged the race. But they just missed a teeny tiny detail, cause by the time the crane came out on the track to collect the Ferrari, many drivers, including Pierre Gasly, were still stuck on the track after making a pit stop, and the low visibility meant that the Frenchman only saw the big machinery as he passed by it, which, of course, made everyone in the paddock super angry. After all, we've got to remember that Jules Bianchi lost his life a few years ago in a very similar incident, so it was no surprise to see everyone speaking up against the management's incompetence. Sergio Perez, for instance, thought that no matter what the conditions are, we should never see a crane on track while the cars are still out there, and you don't really know what can happen there. Up next, Perez opens up about the race direction at Suzuka. Now, the Mexican isn't the type of guy to hold back during interviews, so it wasn't surprising when he went hard at the FIA and questioned the decisions that led to the incident. Speaking after his crazy second-place finish, he said that the track actually looked alright during the formation lap, but the rain got considerably worse as he waited for the 5 red lights on the starting grid. Also, the race directors made the right call by sending out a red flag and stopping the race. That said, the Red Bull driver just couldn't believe his eyes when he saw the 2 recovery vehicles making their way onto the track, and according to him, it was probably the lowest thing that he'd seen for years. To be fair though, it wasn't just the 32-year-old who was mad at the whole situation, as Pierre Gasly, who was the closest driver to the crane, looked absolutely livid in his garage. In fact, he even straight up shouted at his pit wall in frustration and said that he could have died out there. Oh, and the fact that the FIA then slapped a penalty on him for speeding under the safety car only made things worse. Seriously, most drivers said that the speed didn't really matter because they couldn't see the recovery vehicle even when running slowly, so it definitely wasn't the Frenchman's fault for trying to catch up to the rest of the pack in front. Now for F1 drivers' initial reactions to the incident. Interestingly enough, the complete fiasco didn't actually explode right away, as no one had any idea about the incident, and it was only during the red flag when we got our first look at Gasly's onboard footage that showed us just how close he got to the crane, which by the way, was standing on the racing line. As a result, many drivers didn't even have time to react to what had just happened until they already had gone back to their garages during the red flag period. When they realized the fact that they just passed a massive crane, though it's obviously prompted a round of WhatsApp communications between them. Apparently, a lot of them, like Charles Leclerc, got super angry and were very vocal against the whole thing. After all, Jules Bianchi was a mentor for a lot of these youngsters during their formative karting years. Also, just the mere connotation of it happening at the same track and during the same week as that horrible incident all those years ago probably reopened some wounds. Oh, and there was no mincing of words from anyone either, because most of them posted statements on their social media slamming the FIA for being so nonchalant. Norris, for example, posted a tweet questioning how this has even happened. He also pointed toward the Bianchi incident and said that while we do win a race and are ready to risk our lives in these conditions, this is simply unacceptable. Let's look at which drivers actually encountered the crane. Even though the crane was right there on the track while many of the drivers were still making their way to the safety car, it wasn't actually visibly obvious. In fact, many didn't even see it just because of how bad the conditions were. For instance, Fernando Alonso admitted that he didn't catch either the crane or the crashing car of Sainz on the opening lap, and according to him, he couldn't really even see where he was going behind the safety car. That said, the Spaniard still condemned the incident and called it the low point of the race. Likewise, McLaren's Daniel Ricciardo also failed to see the recovery vehicle as he trod along in 8th place. Speaking after the race, he admitted that he wasn't sure whether or not he saw it. In fact, the only reason he got to know about it in the first place was the replays. Then again, he didn't rule out the possibility either, as according to him, you'd struggle to see the crane in those conditions even if it was right next to you. To be fair though, most cars had passed by the time of the incident, and it was perhaps only Pierre Gasly, Mick Schumacher, and a couple of other drivers who saw it firsthand. But of course, that excuses nothing. Plus, the FIA has been also criticized for not putting high-vis lights and sirens on their recovery vehicles, especially if the track conditions are compromised. What's more, Vettel is grateful for a lucky escape. Now, over the past couple of years, Sebastian Vettel has not only been vocal about all the issues within the sport, but outside of it as well. So it wasn't surprising when he also weighed in and spoke up about the management in Suzuka. Suzuka. Oh, and he was pretty analytical about the whole thing, which again is something that we expect from the guy. According to the German, we should all first and foremost be thankful that everyone, including Carlos Sainz, was fine and that the sport got a lucky escape. Having said that, the four-time world champion pointed his finger at the tire choice as the main aggressor of the incident. Speaking after the race, he said that while no one's really at fault for putting on the wrong tires at the start, it was still something that shouldn't be overlooked. Also, the pressure of switching to the inners as soon as possible is just not safe for the sport. So Pirelli needs to make the wet tire a lot faster to make it usable in these conditions, and perhaps this would have prevented the headache. Besides, it's pretty insane to think that the pinnacle of motorsport can't race when there's some water on the track. Like sure, the draining system at some of the old tracks aren't good enough, but at the same time, this has been a known problem for years, and better tires will certainly go a long way toward fixing it. Finally, Vettel refuses to put the blame on the crane driver. The Aston Martin driver knows all too well just how tricky these wet conditions can be. After all, his first career win in a Toro Rosso also came under similar circumstances. But according to him, visibility is the #1 issue that makes racing in this weather worse, and it'd be safe for everyone if drivers didn't suddenly lose grip while trying to race each other on a wet track. Of course, the German also spoke up about the recovery vehicle incident, but unlike most people in the paddock, he refused to put the blame on the crane driver. Instead, he thinks that the FIA is definitely the one at fault here, because the guy who drives the tractor is obviously going to do it whenever he gets the command from race control. So we really shouldn't expect him to disobey the racing authority and refuse to take care of the wreckage on track. With that said, Vettel was still pretty level-headed about the incident and said that this was a big lesson for everyone involved in the sport, and hopefully we can all learn from it, because today we were just lucky. That's a wrap for this video. Who do you think was at fault for the incident at Suzuka? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.